thought that was fascinating. I've been thinking for a long time that the Cryptoland and fiat world, and that Cryptoland is this new frontier emerging market that's growing, that's broken up into different nation states, whether it's Ethereum, whether it's Bitcoin, etc. And Manny's actually thinking in the same way, with that same framework of understanding. And really what he's thinking now is like, can Telegram and Ton be like M-Pesa in Kenya? Fascinating way of thinking about it.
Hey guys, welcome to Everyday Finance. Underneath international markets, a massive event is taking place, and the signs are becoming clear. Bitcoin has increased by over 50% in the first half of 2025, surpassing both gold and the S&P 500, thanks to institutional interest and liquidity infusions. Ethereum is not far behind. Despite being cyclical or speculative, these movements point to a systemic change. Raoul Pal, the CEO of Real Vision and a macro specialist, blames global liquidity dynamics. According to Pal, liquidity has a greater influence on asset values than interest rates, valuations, or profitability. Credit cycles, financial market expansion, and central banks all influence global liquidity. Liquidity generated by fiscal stimulus, quantitative easing, and lower interest rates moves into riskier assets like cryptocurrencies. Pal supplements this idea with demographic trends and declining productivity in aging developed countries. When baby boomers retire, labor output declines, and political institutions take on more debt. Real yields are suppressed as a result of increased pressure to maintain low interest rates and print money. Capital is drawn to riskier, but highly profitable assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum because of this environment. Pal claims that because of this generational trend, central banks would eventually infuse liquidity, making cryptocurrency a structural winner. He claims that the only methods to lessen demographic drag are blockchain and artificial intelligence. Productivity is increased exponentially by these technologies, and cryptocurrency gains from capital inflows and its place in the developing digital economy. All things considered, low yields, aging populations, digital technology, and macro dynamics are what are driving the surge in Bitcoin and Ethereum. To find out how these changes impact your portfolio, watch the most recent interview with Raoul Pal. For other insights, subscribe, like, and share.
Boom, a question now, because I use Telegram every day.
Yeah.
I don't know where the fuck any of these applications are. I just message people. Yeah, I've got my wallet because you sent me some ton a long time ago. I don't know where anything else is. Where do I find the games? Where do I find any of this? Where do I find payment rails? How do I send you anything? It's so not obvious from that screen.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's, Rome wasn't built in a day, right? And I would say, again, I'm not happy with, how, let's say, confusing some of the stuff looks.
I just can't find it. I don't even know how to get
discovery. Discovery is a topic, right? But look, I've got full confidence that we can fix these things. And the challenge, is also there's, of course, it's a global product, right? In the sense that in Asia, again, and of course China's not the only one, but you have super apps in Korea, for instance, and to some extent in Japan. So we need to build for an audience that is not just a Western audience, right? Actually, quite the opposite. The majority of Telegram users, 80% or so, sit in these frontier and emerging markets, right? But look, there's a lot of room for improvement. We're working hard on it, and we take the feedback on board and very seriously. And I would expect major sort of step changes in the sort of UI UX over the next months, quarters, and of course years.
Yeah, because as it moves away from being a messaging app, I know it's a lot more than that, but you kind of have to know how to do it. But
Correct.
Sooner or later, it should become an easier experience, and then that will just help what you're trying to do at the foundation level, which is your job is to grow the ecosystem.
Correct.
And that's from my perspective as a friend of yours, I would say the hardest thing is that UX part and UI,
sure.
because you have to know what you're doing. If not, you don't see it.
Absolutely, and frankly, also there's this, since we're having sort of a friendly conversation about this, there comes it's not like sort of Dutch disease, but, because, we have all this like distribution power, there is sometimes, I think, a risk that you have a bit that complacency kicks in, right? Sort of, oh, we are Telegram, it's already like over. And we haven't done it yet. We haven't, it's a bit like, the old Sequoia, like take down the posters, right? Like it's day one, like, to win a Formula One race, it's not about the absolute speed, but the relative speed to someone else. Like, the other guys are hungry and they're accelerating, right? So we need to do that too, right? And so, yeah, so definitely there's, with all humility, like, we haven't yet fully executed on this, but, we have, over the next 18 months, we're gonna, give it our real best shot and gonna go super hard at this. And I think,
it hasn't been going that long. How long's it been launched for? 2 years?
So it's been more like sort of 3-4 years, but the official, let's say, partnership with Telegram was first announced in late 23. So that's 18 months ago, frankly.
Yeah.
And what happened since, we had basically, Pavel Durov on stage for the first time last year, Token 2049, launching USDT, well executed. We had this tapping game phenomenon, and we had the ads platform being put on Ton Rails, right? And, we had a very good momentum last year. Ton went from, I don't know, $2 to $8 by this time last year, roughly, or certainly last summer. And then we had a bit of a curveball in Paris. Happy to talk about that too. But
I want to talk a little bit about that. There is a perceived geopolitical risk with Telegram because it's, various, partly Russian connections, stuff like that. And this world is still, us versus them, whatever it is. We're seeing that bifurcation.
Yes.
How do we deal with that? If it's a global app.
Yeah, no,
how do we deal with the perceived fear that the US suddenly wakes up angry or Europe wakes up angry, and before you know it, everybody shuts down?
I mean, the US is actually not a problem, but the key question is, Raoul, whether the famous Winston Churchill quote also applies to Europe. Will Europe will always do the right thing, but only after all other options have been exhausted. And I'm not so sure. Speaking as a European, it's not a proudest move.
It was on my list of questions to ask you. I have no idea what Europe's doing within all of this. But anyway, talk me through that geopolitical side.
Sure.
Because you guys have lived it because of what happened to.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, of course, I mentioned the biography of Pavel, but what people need to understand is that their first business, VK, was and still is the single biggest social network in Europe, if you count Russia into Europe, which it used to be. And for me, the interesting story about VK was that, unlike China, which was so firewalled, right, neither Facebook or WhatsApp could have entered China and competed. Europe, including Russia, were open. So Facebook came, WhatsApp came, WeChat came in the end. And in most places, I'm from Germany, especially the US players just ended up bulldozing the local competition, despite the locals being actually really well funded and had the whole local VC and media landscape behind them. The network effects were too strong, but not in sort of Russia and Eastern Europe and sort of former Soviet Union states, where the Durov brothers basically crushed Facebook and WhatsApp and won the market. Of course, they had home turf advantage, granted, but there was no regulatory like sort of firewall or reason like there was in China. So these guys are good. That did not happen in a lot of places. So good that the business got big. They had 100 million users 15 years ago. So big that the government got interested and eventually too interested, right? So, and there's a whole Tucker Carlson interview that Pavel gave last year. But basically what happened is the FSB came knocking, right, 15 years ago and said, oh, all this user data, give it to us. Oh, the opposition, we don't like them. Shut all this stuff down. Ukrainians, no. And not only did Pavel Durov not comply with this stuff, even further, he published it. He sort of made fun of it almost, and of course, that had consequences with a picture of a dog saying, "I'm not your lap dog, Mr. Putin," right? And if you want to get out alive, so this guy's got balls of steel, but also to a fault, right?
I mean, there's one person you don't fuck with on a personal level, and that's Putin, because you just...
Correct.
I mean, I don't know how you protect yourself.
No, look, and this is actually when Telegram was born, right? So in this, his apartment got raided and like literally SWAT teams and everything was surveilled. And at this moment, he had no basically safe way to communicate online with his genius brother because they were everything was tapped, right? And so that's when the idea of Telegram was born. And
Raoul Pal contends that market behavior is driven by liquidity rather than profitability or values. Since the 2008 financial crisis, global central banks have flooded the system with cash through fiscal stimulus programs, quantitative easing, and huge debt refinances. Global liquidity has increased by about 8% a year as a result. This increase in liquidity devalues currencies. The purchasing power of fiat money steadily decreases as more of it is created and introduced into economies. When asset performance is compared to this growing liquidity base, the narrative shifts. Real estate and stocks stay the same, but don't grow. As a hedge, gold stagnates. Crypto always performs better than other investments. Bitcoin. Why? Bitcoin is essentially distinct. This decentralized fixed supply asset is immune to inflationary monetary policies and cannot be managed by the government. It was made to resist the devaluation of money in our day. Demographic time bomb adds to the strain. In wealthy nations, structural economic stagnation is being brought on by aging populations and declining fertility rates. Governments have issued more debt to prevent collapse rather than to finance infrastructure or innovation because of slower development, lower productivity, and fewer workers. That debt is backed by an additional liquidity infusion. The rules of economics have changed in this environment. Raoul Pal believes that investing in Ethereum and Bitcoin is a logical reaction to the structural collapse of the modern economy. Scarce digital assets outside of the traditional financial system become appealing and essential for wealth preservation as fiat currencies depreciate in government. Debt loads become unmanageable. Because of this, intense crypto concentration is not contrarian, but rather plain sense. Digital scarcity is one of the only lifeboats due to demographic stress and a weak fiat system. Go back to the video.
Basically, they eventually sort of folded, just sold their stake and they got a raw deal there, but not the end of the story. Took their money, left the country, ended up in Dubai, and bought a bunch of Bitcoin early. That stretched, of course. So Bitcoin is actually the reason that Telegram has been independently financed for such a long time.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so Pavel owes a great debt, and I think the world owes a great debt for Bitcoins. He went in, I think, 2012, 2013, something like that. And he had a big exit, of course, relatively speaking. I think he had a $300 million exit, so roughly 13, 14 years ago. And then, so Telegram is now, definitely an app of, geopolitical interest, let's say. And of course, he is, someone who left the country where he was born. And keep in mind, he was born in the Soviet Union and he saw the two systems. He lived in Italy as a 5-year-old. And he talks about all that in the Oslo interview. It's quite interesting. So he's on Team Freedom, right? And is paying a big price for this. And so he was asked last week, are you a Russian asset? And of course, he said, look, I get quite annoyed when I get this question because I've, paid a huge price to basically, and there were, and we don't know whether it's the Russians or other states, but, there were attempts on his life, right? Sort of thing, right? And what happened then in France, he was basically accused that he should be held responsible for everything illegal happening on the platform, which is not a problem that exists in the US. In the US, the large tech companies fought and won the battle many moons ago that the user is ought to be held responsible. If I have an Apple iPhone, right, which I do, and if I were to do something illegal with that iPhone, which I won't, right, but if I did, Tim Cook wouldn't land in jail. Like I would get a problem, right, but not. And so. And in Europe, we don't have basically the First Amendment or these sort of grown-up, let's say, tested laws. And he's a suspect that, he should be held responsible for, whatever happens on Telegram, which is a tool, right? And of course, with 1 billion users, statistically speaking, you will have some bad apples, right? Luckily, they basically didn't find anything of substance. They went through everything and he got his travel ban lifted. So he's also in Dubai right now. But he still has to ask for permission, right? And it turns out now that actually the plot thickens, right? It's not just about, I don't know what the French said at the beginning, like, the child porn and stuff like this. It's geopolitical, right? Pavel just went on the record saying he was approached by, French intelligence and says, elections in Romania. Can you please shut down this, and this, and this? We are building a NATO base there and we want this candidate to win. And of course, Telegram is not pro or against the other candidate. They have no position on this, but they're pro freedom of speech, right? And he went public with this, right? And it's not clear to me what the end game for the Europeans is. I mean, there's worse places to get stuck.
Deeply concerning is Europe. I mean, you're kind of losing entrepreneurs because
we're nowhere in AI, right? I mean, Germany, where I'm from, we don't have nuclear power. And the car industry is being decimated from either Tesla on the left and then the Chinese on the right. And the problem is the lack of leadership, like who's actually in charge. And this really is sort of the fourth turning in my mind, right? Where, the current generation of European leaders, and of course, I should, with all humility, say like, maybe I should be president or run for chancellor one day. But, I've decided to, build a digital nation. Like, and I think, my hope in Europe, is still, of course, full of talent and, has a history of turning things around. But it's not our proudest moment, to be fair.
And the UK's no better either. I mean, fascinating, Manny. I can see why you gave up some of your very valuable time to join the foundation, because to get this right, it's a big thing. It's a very big thing. It's a huge opportunity, fascinating, and I can't wait to see where you get to with this journey, because I think all eyes are on it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for giving me such a distinguished audience. Great fan of your show, and I hope we're entering the banana zone. So
we all do, my friend. Our hopes and dreams are in that fucking banana.
The path to greatness is never straight, right? And it's about not about the cards you're being dealt, but how you play the hand. And yeah, hopefully we're gonna play our hand really well. But look, we need all the help we can get. So please, thank you for giving us a platform. And happy to do this again in a couple of months' time. Of course, Ton is open for business, coming to the US, and we're open for partnerships, and we want the industry to win, right? And to put freedom into orbit. So that's why we're doing this. So I really appreciate the time. And
fantastic. Well, good luck with everything.
Yeah, likewise. All the best, Raoul. Take care.
So I thought that was fascinating. I've been thinking for a long time that the Cryptoland and fiat world, and that Cryptoland is this new frontier emerging market that's growing, that's broken up into different nation states, whether it's Ethereum, whether it's Bitcoin, etc. And Manny's actually thinking in the same way, with that same framework of understanding. And really what he's thinking now is like, can Telegram and Ton be like M-Pesa in Kenya? Fascinating way of thinking about it.
The primary argument made by Raoul Pal is that the economic cycle has shifted. Because of structural issues like declining productivity, aging populations, and mounting debt, policymakers are only able to infuse money. This approach devalues fiat currencies covertly, reduces returns, and expands the money supply in order to stabilize the system. Asset price distortions, stocks and real estate rising, while wages remain stagnant, show this devaluation even. Though inflation statistics might not, Pal discovers that whereas traditional assets mostly have nominal worth when asset prices are divided by total liquidity, cryptocurrency, particularly Bitcoin, has outperformed and produced tangible returns. This theory is supported by the market. Bitcoin has gained 30% so far this year, peaking at around $123,000. For the first time in months, Ethereum's price surpassed $3,000. This movement has been driven by roughly $700 million in short liquidations, institutional inflows, and favorable U.S. policies. This isn't hype. This is liquidity. Investors understand that traditional assets no longer offer growth potential. Since cryptocurrency is structurally aligned and digitally limited, it absorbs excess liquidity better than anything else. A macro allocation is evolving from a speculative trade. By 2030, Pal expects an economic singularity when GDP and productivity models may be altered by exponential technology like robots and artificial intelligence. High volatility or deflationary abundance are unavoidable outcomes. But money will depreciate, liquidity will increase, and scarce digital assets like cryptocurrency will take the lead. Pal thinks the explosion today is just the start of something bigger. Are you keeping an eye on this shift or getting ready for it? Tell us why you believe that cryptocurrency is a technology, hedge, or both. For macro insights, like, comment, and subscribe. Pal suggests thinking structurally because the system might be collapsing,